What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel and podcast network. He is Andrew Destin. I am Noah Hiles. As always, our show is brought to you by the North Shore Tavern. If you love baseball, you'll love the North Shore Tavern. The interior is wall-to-wall Pirates. There are appetizers, entrees, cocktails, and, of course, steak and seafood on a sizzling lava stone. Open every day. The North Shore Tavern is right across the street from PNC Park and is Pittsburgh's home for steak on a stone. Andrew, the last time you and I recorded one of these things, the Pirates had just lost a heartbreaking series to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Colin Holderman surrendered a home run with two men on to Jock Peterson. I believe that dropped them to 500, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, maybe they're a game above 500 still.
Game above, yeah.
But it put them in a tough spot. And since we have last recorded, this team has not won a baseball game. The Pirates have now lost seven straight. Can't keep track. 7 straight, which is their longest losing streak of the season. They have gone from 2 games over 500 to 5 games beneath 500. First time they've been 5 below 500 since July 7th. A lot of their progress they made throughout July, the 4 straight series victories, the sweep over the White Sox, all that's kind of negated now. And if you look, there's 7 weeks left in the regular season. This team is pretty much out of the playoff mix. That could change, obviously, if they get hot like they did in July and they rattle off a whole bunch of series victories. They're back in the mix. But it's looking improbable now, based off of how certain individuals are performing, based off of injuries, just based off the way other teams in the National League are playing right now. Doesn't seem like this team is going to reach the postseason, especially after, like I just said, losing its 7th in a row, getting swept for the 2nd straight series, losing Sunday to the Dodgers. So I guess the point of this show, Andrew, rather than recapping another frustrating sweep for this team, the point of this show is just the question, what is the goal for the remainder of 2024 for this team? Because the playoffs, sure, you can say the playoffs are the goal, but let's be real. It's very improbable for this team to make the playoffs at this point. With where they are, with where other teams are, probably not going to happen. So with 7 weeks left, what is the goal for the Pittsburgh Pirates?
The goal is you got to figure out who's here in 25. And I know that's an obvious way of putting it, right? I mean, that's clear. You know, everybody's playing for a starting job, things of that nature. But this is a really important time for 2 reasons. And one I'm going to go to is that there has been a failure at the major league level to sufficiently develop a lot of guys who are big prospects or guys who at least had high pedigree, things of that nature. This 2-month stretch is the time to figure out who is here, who's going to be in Pittsburgh in 2025, who's going to have to go back to the minors, and who, frankly, isn't part of that future plan. I'm looking at this stretch as a very critical one for guys who aren't even at the major league level right now. I'm looking at Henry Davis and Jack Suwinski. Those are 2 guys who were expected to be big components of this current crop. I'm looking at them, and I'm also looking at the rest of the farm system, because the reality is a lot of guys have already gotten to Pittsburgh. The farm system, you know, this probably isn't news to many of you guys, but when you look at various outlets across the country, whether that's a Baseball America, whether that's MLB Pipeline, whatever it is, this is no longer a solid or excellent farm system. At this point, it's struggling to be average in Major League Baseball. So I'm not, trying to sound the alarms or things of that nature. What I'm saying is there's a lot of guys who are already in the big leagues or close or have been already. I look at this 2-month stretch as, frankly, a trial run. The games may be, still meaningful, maybe not quite as important as they were in June, July, etc. But you got to figure out who's part of this thing for next year, because that's what this really comes down to. If the team's Baseball Reference gives them a 1.3% chance of making the postseason, it's going to be a miracle if they do. So if they do, hats off to them. But to me, you're looking toward the future. That's what's so key here.
I agree. And so let's look at that future. There are a whole bunch of names that you can go and examine and kind of make a case for they should probably be used differently now based off of focusing on 2025 rather than trying to make the playoffs. We'll start with the 2 obvious ones. What's the plan for Paul Skenes and Jared Jones moving forward? Do these guys pitch out through the rest of the season, or do we see them used maybe in a piggyback situation or with an opener and skip starts and just kind of maybe even get shut down toward the end of the year since the playoffs are no longer in the picture.
Yeah, I think the approach there is it's going to be, personally speaking, I think very different for the two of them. And I'd love your thoughts on this too, Noah. Is I think for Paul, the goal is how far can you extend him, obviously without risking injury. But this is a guy who has not pitched a lot in his life. It is still very much a key component here is how do you build the guy up to being able to throw 200 innings in a season? I'm not saying he's going to throw 200 next year, but you have to be able to get closer to that. What is the magic number? That's for the Pirates to determine there. With Jared Jones, I feel like you got to let him ride it out. I mean, this guy's probably not going to join the rotation again, at least for another week. He's supposed to start, I believe Ben Cherington said on his radio show on Wednesday for Indianapolis. So that's what, the 14th? So you're looking at a return to the rotation, maybe the 19th or the 20th. That really only gives you a month and change left in the season for a guy who, for all intents and purposes, will have missed 2 months. So I think he might go the entire way, but Skenes, maybe you're a little bit more cautious there. What say you, Noah?
I agree. I think you keep both of these guys in the starting rotation because if 2025 is your focus, you want to make sure they're both healthy and pitching them a million innings, starting them on 3 days rest every day for the rest of the season isn't going to be in anyone's best interest. But you need to make sure that these guys are in a place, like you pointed out, Andrew, that they can throw 180 innings next year, 190 innings, that won't be a significant jump. And both of these guys are in different spots where Paul, like you pointed out, this is only his second season as a full-time pitcher in his life, where he's not played another position, been hitting, where he's just focused just on pitching. He's had one in college and now one in the pros. And I think that's why we're seeing a little bit of drop in velocity for this guy over his last couple of outings. Not that I'm not worried about Paul Skenes as a pitcher in general. I mean, still 4 runs over 6 innings against the Dodgers is a pretty good start for quite literally anyone. But yeah, we're seeing him get a little tired, I think, out there as far as his velocity dropping off. And that's because this guy has not pitched this much in his life. It's relatively new for him to be pitching this long of a season. Maybe not workload, but just as far spread out as it's been, his body's never been through this. So I think it's important to not shut him down, to let him experience a full season as a professional, starting in spring training, going all the way through September. As far as Jared Jones goes, I think it's important for him to get back from this injury, to not let that shut him down. I mean, this is a guy who just started throwing at this high level velocity this year. You don't want to just turn that off. You got to let him learn how to revamp, because this guy's going to go on the IL at least one more time in his career. You would have to assume, right? And I mean, no one's going to get a perfect clean bill of health, even if he's able to avoid, the big injuries. And it's important for him to be able to learn how to build back up and still pitch. And maybe I think you can cap what they do. Maybe you just have predetermined innings limits for every start. Say you're going 2 times through the order. However long that takes, that's how it's going to be. Or you're getting 5 innings like they did with Jones at one time in New York. And I know it's not like a strict innings limit. That's what they have said all year. But keep them on a schedule, but also maybe just monitor no over usage, because that wouldn't make a ton of sense. We'll move down now. You talked about Henry and Jack, and I agree. I mean, these guys, we got to figure out what's going on with them. I mean, what center field is the only, you would assume going into the offseason that it'll be De La Cruz with probably a left-handed platoon in right next year. Reynolds is definitely your left fielder. Center field is the biggest question mark on this team, because I feel like it's within reason that they could re-sign Tellez if they wanted to, or they could go find someone better if they want to spend some money or make a trade. But center field, there's not a lot out there to go get, both in the trade market and in free agency, especially within their price range. So they've got to figure out if Jack Suwinski is the guy that they're going to trot into Bradenton next year as the favorite to win that job or not. And Henry Davis, they got to figure out what in the world they have with him. Forget the position that he's going to play. They drafted this guy for his bat, and this guy needs to come up and at least have one good month of baseball in the major leagues in 2024. And if he can't give you that, then how in the world do you view him this offseason with Joey Bart coming back and Endy Rodriguez going to be healthy? A couple other names that I just wanted to touch on, Andrew, before we wrap up here. 4 guys in AAA right now. How many of them do you see playing a game for the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2024? Billy Cook, Nick Yorke, Mike Burrows, and Braxton Ashcraft.
I'm going to say two.
Before you say anything, because I want to say these 4 names that I just mentioned, these are guys that are all going to have an impact in 2025 if they're healthy. In some way, shape, or form, these are all very important pieces to next year. So that's why I bring them up.
I will say 2, and I will not make that a guarantee of which 2 that is. But if I'm going to increase the number to 3, the one that I would exclude would be Ashcraft. I don't know that we see him this year just based off the injury.
Yeah.
However, I think he's, to your point, no, I think he's very much going to be a big factor in it next year. The one guy that I would say that I'm maybe a little hesitant on is I don't know if we're going to see Mike Burrows this year. I think there is enough pitching depth at the major league level that, Burrows, I feel like would only come up if it were mid-September and it was determined that, okay, you're going to shut down one of Jones or Skenes and give Burrows, or maybe I'll throw a 5th name out there. Maybe Bubba Chandler gets a spot start up there. To me, that would be that'd be a very quick trajectory, and I don't know that that's in the Pirates' best interests. But I could see a scenario where in mid-September, you give one of those 3 pitchers a chance. With Yorke and Cook, I see no reason for these guys not to get to the big league level within the next week, frankly. I think that you're still working without Nick Gonzalez at second base. I know Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is playing there, and that's important. But, Nick Yorke is able to bounce around the field a little bit. They're playing him in center right now. I don't think they're hiding their intentions with that particularly well, the Pirates. This is a guy who hasn't played center field since high school. I know they've tried him out there a couple of times in the last couple of weeks since they acquired him. He can play left as well as second, certainly. Billy Cook is a guy who can bounce around the field as well. He's played a little bit in the outfield where he's, frankly, more comfortable. So I look at it as both those guys, to the point of the Jack Suwinski conversation. They're going to get chances. And, maybe Nick Yorke in center field is not exactly on the horizon for the Pirates, but I think it goes to the point of they are trying to see what they have in both of those guys who are versatile to see if they're second baseman of the future, center fielders of the future, utility guys of the future. I think those are the conversations that, frankly, should be figured out at the major league level in the near future.
I have continually said that I don't expect Cook and Yorke to be up simply because they don't have a lot of time in AAA.
Sure.
Like, between the 2 of them, I don't think they've played 100 games in AAA in their career. That could be wrong. Don't fact check me on that. But it's a very small sample size.
Right.
But at this point, yeah, like I'm just looking, and you even brought up with the starting rotation, Andrew. What purpose does Marco Gonzalez serve for this organization? I mean, he's not going to be back next year, will he? I don't think so. So if that's the case, then why would he start games in September as opposed to Ashcraft if he's healthy, or Michael Burrows, or Thomas Harrington, or Bubba Chandler? Those are the guys. And you have a 6-man rotation. And if you want to give skip a start for Skenes or Jones, you have guys to do that with. It shouldn't be Jake Woodford, or Domingo Herman shouldn't be getting innings. I mean, these are the guys that should be pitching in September. And I don't know if they're actually going to go through with that or not. But the same can be said for a guy like Michael A. Taylor in center field. For, the defense that he's provided and everything, the reality is he's not helping you win a lot of games in 2024 with his offense. And, I mean, Billy Cook or Nick Yorke or even Jack Suwinski, I mean, one of those 3 guys might be your center fielder next year. And while Cook and Yorke are very raw, get them maybe the final series. Get them a couple of weeks. Get them something because they're a part of the future. So, I mean, I would like to see all 4 of these guys up here. But I agree with you, Andrew. I think it's probably going to be half. I think Yorke will get a shot, and I think Burrows will get a shot. Those are the 2 I'm most confident. Ashcraft because of the injury, and Cook because I don't think he's played hardly any time in AAA. So those would be my 2 guys that I see getting some sort of opportunity. Final question, Andrew, before we wrap this up. It's August 11th. We are 7 weeks until the end of the year. If this team, which is 5 games under 500 right now, and they've played, 60, whatever, I don't care. I'm bad at math. They have 61 losses and 50 55 wins, 56 wins and 61 losses.
Yes.
Yeah. So they played roughly what? What does that make that?
I think
130 games? 120 games? I don't know.
Right.
Again, comment section is going to be mean to me about my math skills. I'm tired. I've written a lot of stuff today. My point being is they're 5 games under with 7 weeks of the season left. If they finish over 500, Andrew, is this still a successful year?
It is when I zoom out from the 10,000-foot lens of what my personal expectations were for the year, right? I didn't think this was an above 500 team, but expectations are allowed to change. They're allowed to pivot based off the guys you have in the room and what the team puts forth on the field, and the way that you approach things like the trade deadline, and the way that you approach things like managing players. So I'm going to call myself out here and say that just because you get above 500, I don't think that can suffice. I don't think the way that the team operated, I don't think the way the team spoke publicly, if you put the cards on the table, you're going to be held accountable for it. So I think the idea of this is a team that thought it could qualify for the postseason come trade deadline and actually act aggressively by getting guys like Brian De La Cruz and Connor Falefa and Jalen Beeks. Yeah, this is not a success. If you're 82-80 and you miss a wild card spot by 5 games, I don't think it's a success. How about you?
I would agree. And it's the way they would have gotten to it. I think that's the big point here, where if they would have just played 500 baseball after the trade deadline, and like that would be frustrating. And I don't know if I'd call that a success, but it would just be, all right, it was a slightly above average team. And you would feel encouraged, I think, going into the offseason, or more encouraged than even now, where sure, if they finish over 500 now, that means they would have played 6 games over 500 for the final 7 weeks of the season. So that's kind of encouraging. But you just look, it's the route to get above 500, even though it is an improvement from 2023. It's tainted with a lot of very, very winnable games that resulted in losses. And one side of the fence could say, hey, that's just the step in this process. You have to play in meaningful baseball games, and then you have to learn how to win in meaningful baseball games. But there's another side of the fence that could say, or you could just win the games. You just make the plays that win. And that's what good players do. You make the right decisions. You execute. It's tough. I would say, but yeah, but if they, missing the playoffs is one thing, but simply finishing above 500, that's not good enough. I think in order to call this a successful season, this team enters September, like the final week of September, I should say. If they're 2 games back, if they're legitimately in the playoff race, then I think you can call it a successful season. But simply finishing above 500 after everything that's gone down, it would be an impressive thing to do considering where they are right now, but it's still not a successful season. Let us know what you think. Comment below. Please don't make fun of my math skills or Andrew's sunburn. But that's all we got. Thank you to North Shore Tavern for sponsoring this show as always. He's Andrew Destin. I'm Noah Hiles. You can check out our work at post-gazette.com and keep tuning in to the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel and podcast network for all of your Pittsburgh Pirates coverage. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.